Welcome to episode 3 of the D-League. Today we're going to talk about lore, how important it is for the game, for communities, and how you can use it to your advantage by implementing it inside the game or your community. And so third time's the charm, episode 3. Today with a special guest. So guest, please introduce yourself first.
My name is Michael Britt. I've been a longtime friend of Bilal here for, I don't know, how long have we been playing video games together?
Too long, that's for sure.
All right, yeah, let's stop. All right, I'm out of here. Bye, guys. Peace out. End of the podcast. End of friendship. I have a BA in Cultural Studies, English Literature from McGill University, and I'm a grad student there currently studying narratives, post-colonial narratives, and narrative in general. So I kind of have a perspective on the narrative side of things. I'm also a massive esports fan, or at least massive League of Legends fan and avid player. So I know all about those narratives, all the ones that they construct and how they interact with lore. Mm-hmm. And I guess that's my perspective on things today, like particularly the esports side of lore and how it interacts with esports, and whether it's necessary and all these questions.
All right, sounds like you know a lot of stuff about lore and story. So
I do know a lot of stuff about lore and stories.
Happy to have you here. So let's get going. Our first point. Let's start by talking about the importance of story inside a game. Mike, what do you think? Like, what is the importance of in-game story? What does it bring to the game?
Well, I mean, it's kind of everything, in my opinion. Actually, that's not true. I mean, we're talking about games generally now, right? There are a lot of games without stories at all. I'm thinking like, well, I don't know. I mean, it depends how loosely you want to define a narrative. But like, I'm thinking like, what's that game? Flower? What's it? The one where you float around in a...
Yeah, I think...
And you're just a pedal?
The one for PlayStation,
yeah.
Flower, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also Journey is for PlayStation, isn't it? The Journey kind of has a loose narrative, although both of them are without narrative, essentially. Journey has a narrative. I think it's hard to argue it doesn't. But they're minimalist in their narratives. I don't know. In film, I think film particularly, we talk about narrative and spectacle as opposing forces in the attractiveness of a film. So like the narrative is the story, it's the plot, the characters, it's what happens, it's how it's what a narrative is. We don't need to explain it. But then the spectacle is kind of counter to that, and yet it's an integral part of film. It's not in a way that it's not entirely in many other like mediums. Literature, it's part of it, but it's not so much a part of it as it is in film. So when you watch an action film, there'll be a fight scene, and for sometimes 5 minutes, the narrative will just stop. That fight scene doesn't contribute at all to the narrative, right? It pretty much pauses it, and yet we want to watch those, and then sometimes those are the most important parts of why we watch film, right? Like, who cares? Who's going to go watch a Michael Bay movie for the story? You watch it for the explosions, and that's the spectacle. So, I mean, I think games run exactly the same line. Actually, they're very similar to film in a lot of ways. You're always balancing narrative and spectacle, and you're kind of and the same goes for esports and sports generally. There's like the spectacle and there's the narrative of it, and each of them is appealing.
Yeah, I think but like you say, for some games it's not that important, like the story is not that important, but in my opinion, if, for example, let's say you create some first-person shooters are always pretty light on story, right? Like you just play the character and you just need some reason to run through like the level or through
well, at
that
least
world.
in multiplayer, that's true.
Yeah. In single player, it depends on how you want to do it. But for example, the classic FPS games that started it all. They started the genre not on the great story like Doom or Quake. Okay, so you are Doom guy on Mars and you do stuff, I mean, you probably skip the story cutscenes,
right?
Yeah,
like which is just a wall of text. But I think even for a game like that, you need to kind of define the character you're playing, or like the story. Even if Doom doesn't have like the deepest story, you at least need to give the player a reason to advance through the game. I mean, if you just run through levels and you shoot stuff and like levels change, but you have no clue. You don't explain why levels are changing or why monsters are changing. I think the game is pretty boring as well because it kind of seems random. So I think like the game and the characters are kind of bland. If you don't put in much thought about like the scenario, or like why is the character doing the things that he or she is doing. So I think even for like for a game that's light on story, you still need to have some story and background info, so like the player can actually still relate to the character.
Yeah, actually, that's something that's actually a pretty interesting point, because I think whenever I play like those simple games like that, where they, well, not necessarily simple games, but where they have a simple story or narrative, I think it actually kind of makes me yearn for, you know, like more story, because because there isn't a lot of it already. But the game is like so fun that you're kind of interested, or I guess I'm kind of like interested in, you know, how it goes forward. And actually, I think the new Doom is kind of one of those games where I felt that, where I thought it was actually the new Hell environment was really cool. And I think I always thought I thought it was in a way hilarious and also cool at the same time, how in Doom they had this kind of mix between science and religion, almost, in that you're using a teleporter to go to hell rather than dying or something. And so
classic.
Yeah, so I mean, and in Doom well, it's not Doom 4, but the Doom reboot, where they, like, the gameplay was great, like playing through it was perfect, but the story was basically a monologue, almost a monologue from Samuel Hayden, the revived robot guy. and he was a really interesting character, but they kind of cut you off at the end, because Doom has always been a game where there isn't much story. But like I said, I feel like that gave me like a yearning, like what are they gonna do, you know, next with Doom? The game is really fun, and because of how fun it is, it's cool to see like what they supplement that gameplay with next in terms of, you know, story.
So what about a game?
Yeah. Go on. Sorry.
What about a game like Flower, though? I mean, it doesn't have a story. You know? Do you want more story from Flower, or do you like?
No, I mean, I don't
accept it as it is.
Yeah, I mean, when I say that, I don't mean to criticize and say, wow, they should have put more story. I think it's
that
just...
would be a funny criticism of Flower.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's a critic out there who's had a review that, wow, where's the story in this game? They really didn't get, you know,
disgusting. These negligent developers. Exactly. No, but it's I mean I haven't played Flower, but I mean my assumption is you kind of do things and progress in a way without like any talking or any sort of direction of saying, you know, defined direction, right? Where there's
well, it is a sandbox, and there are objectives.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a sense of you do something, but there's not a narrative in the sense of
So doesn't
and the question is, do you need a narrative? I mean, I think it's obvious you don't.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, obviously you don't need one. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't think I think it's more of the games where they have like a minimal amount of story, and then they don't add more. Like, that's actually a really cool kind of way of a game being made, because they expressed something kind of subtly. You know, they weren't trying to say you need to do this to save the world. They're just saying, like, here's something that I invite you to listen to or understand or feel, right? and it's not always like so big of an idea, and it does, while it does leave that yearning, it's something that I actually really think is cool about like games like Doom, and I'd say even the new Prey game, because they don't really reveal too much. Like there's a lot of story that's clear, but they don't reveal like too much, like which part was real, what is really behind these characters beyond what's presented. Yeah. So I mean, they kind of put you in this zone where they only tell you what what they want you to know, and it's pretty. Yeah, it's a pretty interesting concept, I think, in game development.
Don't you think if a game doesn't like give you too much story, that as a player you can still kind of make up your own story?
Absolutely.
Like, oh yeah. Don't you think about like the background, where do like the monsters come from, or what was the reason why, like okay, experiment failed and then boom, stuff happens. So you kind of think, why did they do that experiment as a player? Maybe it's not set in the game, but as a developer, you could still say, okay, second game, let's go back to that point. Maybe it's a prequel, even. Then you can kind of introduce like the story to the original game, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I find that's true in every medium. I mean, I guess it's especially true in video games. I think a lot of this, anything you're talking about when you're talking about narrative is going to apply over a lot of different mediums, because pretty much every medium in art has a capability, or is often centrally defined by the way it retells narratives, But yeah, I think it's like particularly true of games that you can just make up whatever you want, Like you can have a very minimal story in a game and it can be totally appealing, because you can just, you're playing a character, so you have so much control over the narrative that you don't need it all narrativized to you. You don't need it all told to you. You can make up your own story,
Yeah.
Yeah, true.
It's kind of an interactive way of letting the player bringing up questions that the player is like bringing up these questions on his own, just because like actually it's interesting that Jan said where did the monsters come from, because that's something that I believe is not revealed in Prey, but I mean, playing through it, I don't remember ever learning where the Typhon, which are the enemies that can turn into mugs, they never revealed like where they came from beyond their aliens. So I mean, that's like that kind of automatically raises the question that where did they actually come from? And,
and it can be even more abstract than that. It doesn't even have to be they're alien. You don't have to give you the piece of information they're aliens. It could simply depict something.
Exactly.
And you end up with a lot of. I mean, Journey, I think, is the ultimate example of that. Maybe not the ultimate, but it's a great example of that. I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen Journey. I think it's amazing. I never played it. I want to. I think it's only for PS4. All of the great games are only.
Oh yeah, I've seen the art for this. I haven't actually played it, though.
Well, you're just this character who wanders through the desert and like has to go to a place, but that's it. Like you have an objective, you have to wander there eventually, and otherwise you just wander through a desert and you discover things. And like, I don't know. I watched a whole Let's Play of it and just muted it. I don't think I watched a Let's Play of it with the audio only from the game without anybody talking, because I wanted to make up my story for it, And I think that's uniquely powerful. I mean, Let's Play is less powerful, obviously. It actually removes that element of gaming, which is unique. It makes it more like a film, an abstract film, where you just... And this has been true, I mean, this kind of thing has been true in experimental film since like the 60s. I mean... Andy Warhol was making, well, he didn't make many films where the camera moved, but when he did, the camera often was like a dolly shot through just random scenery, and you would have to make up, what was going on. And the fun parts about watching those films is that, as a viewer, this was something very new, in 1966, but as a viewer, you'd have to figure, you'd be the one making up your own story as you're wandering through a cityscape. Or whatever, an alleyway or something like this. And the same, I mean, and with, a game like Journey or a game in general, because they've got that unique quality of your own, interaction allows you to do that. It heightens that factor.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Do you think there are like any requirements to the story? Like, is there? Well, we talked about how deep does the story need to be, or how light can it be on story? Like the game does it need a deep story? Do you think there are some requirements how you like structure the lore or the story of a game?
I think you can't half-ass things. If I'm going to pardon my French, just exactly what I mean. I think what Bilal was saying earlier is exactly this, essentially, that if you if you create a story that touches on, I don't like games when they create epic storylines that are entirely bland, trite tropes. So the save the world storyline where it's not developed at all, and who cares? That's half-assing it. That's like, you have a narrative, you're basically pretending to make a narrative game, but it's just a narrative slapped on top of a game. And in fact, when I play games like that, I just want them to take out the narrative. I'm like, please, I don't want to hear it. Seriously, like, just give me flour. If you want to make, like, the gameplay's fun, and if you want to make a narrative game, make a narrative game. But if you're not going to make a narrative game, don't make it pretend to be a narrative game. And the same works the opposite way too. If it's a game that has amazing gameplay and incredible environments and things like this, but it has no narrative, I'm like, well, what the hell, it's got these amazing environments, it's got these seemingly amazing characters, but there's no story.
Yeah.
So it needs to. I mean, you have to set out to make a particular thing, and you have to have the whole.
Actually,
but I think,
Actually, I think that's an interesting example because I don't want to say that BioWare is half-assing or anything, so don't kill me. but one thing that's interesting is
let's be on this podcast.
What I thought was really interesting, like for me, was playing Mass Effect 3. All the character interactions I thought were better than the other two. All the story in regards to dialogue, but in Mass Effect 2, the fact that you were doing this one specific mission that was, it wasn't literally save the world, it was, stop the collectors. So you were stopping one fleet or one, group of things from doing something specific, which was abducting humans, right? So you're stopping them from abducting humans on the outskirts, a very specific goal and task, right? Something Yeah. But in Mass Effect 3, they're like, okay, so all the missions are interesting because, you're going and doing a task, and the characters were awesome, and how they react to their planets being damaged and, worry about their family and all that was awesome. But then what I found really off-putting was the fact that the entire time you're just, you're saving the world from like this kind of ridiculous prophecy of giant machines that eat the world every 50,000 years, right? Which I thought,
is that the Reapers?
Yeah, which I thought it was a little silly. I haven't
played Mass Effect.
Yeah,
I played Mass Effect 1, but not the others.
Anyway, but I just think I thought it was silly that it was save the world, like the game is just saving the world, right? Which I thought was so much more of an off-putting story than stopping the collectors. I just because I don't know. Yeah, it felt generic.
Well, it's trite. It's trite.
Yeah, exactly. But I hate saying it because of how good they do everything else. Like the combat was so much better. the combat was so much.
That's a flaw. It's got a flaw.
Yeah,
a big flaw in it.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, yeah, but yeah, no, literally, I want to make the distinction again. Like the character story and all of that was great, and everything else was really good.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's why just something that I liked more about Mass Effect 2 over 3, and I hate the gameplay of Mass Effect 2 in comparison to the third one, which is funny because I just love going through the story and the characters in the second one so much more than the third one, just because I'm not saving the world, I don't know.
Take a game like BioShock. The reason a game like BioShock's kind of the opposite. Actually, no, it's not the opposite. I think BioShock does everything perfectly. and it's the second coming of Christ, and I'm just like totally head over heels for it. But I love it. Probably my favorite single player game ever. But yeah, BioShock, like this, it's the trope plot that kills so many things. It kills movies, it kills books, it kills games, kills narratives in general. You can have the best characters in the universe, you can have the best settings in the universe, you can write beautifully, you can like describe scenes perfectly, or show them perfectly, or make gameplay that plays to them perfectly. But if you're saving the world, who cares?
Yeah.
It's like, all right, I'm going to save the world at a certain point. And I think a good example of taking it down, decreasing the scale to the degree that, well, the stopping the collectors is a good example, but also, look at the BioShock games. Instead of the world, the setting becomes Rapture or Columbia, and it's not even about saving the place. It's about very particular tasks that are personal to the characters, which you learn about and become invested in those settings that are integral to those settings. They're unique to those settings. Like you couldn't take, in BioShock Infinite, spoilers, but it's been out for a long time. The whole thing is about saving Elizabeth, who ends up being your daughter. And you don't know that till the end. And so it's not about saving, who cares about the city? It's about something very particular to your character that you can invest in, rather than the world. Like, okay, who cares? Fine. Save the world, don't save the world at a certain point. Like,
is that actually
the game world blows up?
Do you think that's so off-putting? I mean, do you think like tropes in general are off-putting because like they just seem unrealistic, or like why is it, or is it just because they're overused? Because I feel like that's I think it's off-putting because it kind of seems childish to say, oh, I'm going to be the hero of the universe. I'm literally going to save everything by pointing a pistol at like 300 guys.
That's literally Halo. That's Halo.
Yeah, I guess that's true. But I mean, why do you think? I guess why do you guys think that's so off-putting?
I think because you just know it's really unrealistic. Like you said, pointing a gun at 300 guys. Chances are pretty slim that you are actually gonna win. And I think it's better to actually, you can have like a save the world story, but then you must need to kind of wrap it inside something else. Like for example, in Silent Hill 1, you just want to save your daughter that got lost in Silent Hill, and you have all those monsters roaming around the city and you don't know what's going on. So pretty much the target of the game is just saving your daughter, and you have that trope of like saving the princess, right, or saving your wife or whoever gets captured. But the game it kind of makes you forget about saving your daughter. You just you need to explore the city, and there's really strange stuff happening. So in the end, it's not, well, you try to save your daughter, but in some endings you actually lose, or pretty much in every ending you lose your daughter. And but instead you actually keep a cult from reviving some god that wants to like kill pretty much everyone.
Sure.
So you kind of have the first goal, or the goal you're confronted with is saving your daughter, but in the end you kind of save the city or like the world in the end. So they kind of wrapped this save the world thing, the save the world story, inside of a different story. So and then through the how the story progresses, you don't even realize until the end. So it keeps you invested, like you want to explore more and what keeps happening to the characters. And so they are really creative about telling the story, so you get invested in the story and the characters. So
it's a twist.
Yeah.
It's a twist. I mean, and it's a twist, even though it's like Silent. That's a good example. Like, it's essentially two big tropes, big fat tropes, mashed into one game, but told well enough that it doesn't matter that they're big fat tropes.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, so is a lot of everything. A lot of narratives are big fat tropes that are a lot of movies, a lot of books, that are classics. They're just tropes that are so incredibly told that it doesn't matter that they're tropes.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're good enough BioShock Infinite, it's the save your daughter plot. It is in the end, but you don't realize it till the end.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big twist that it's actually the trope. So, and it's kind of a save the world plot too. So it plays all the same tropes, but you don't know it until the very end, and you're guessing. Yeah, so you have to figure out what the narrative is.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I guess the point is that the telling of the narrative is just as important as what the narrative is in terms of how engaging it is.
Mm.
All right. I would suggest we go to our next point about lore or story. Let's continue how communities, how community stories and interaction affects like the attractiveness of the game to other players that are not that that might have not known the game before, or that were not that interested in the game. So how this community affects other players. And let me just start real quick, because I'm pretty much involved in several communities, or I've pretty much been playing games for the community story most of my life. And I think like you have, for example, if you have an strategy game, then you have players that play your favorite race. So you have like the best player community story, right? You become a fan of that player. For example, in Starcraft Brood War, you had like the super good Terran players, like Slayer's Boxer, that pretty much kind of made Starcraft an esport game that popular in Korea. And then his prodigy, like his student, Aleph, Oof. And then afterwards you had, or at the same time you had Nada, who won the most titles of pretty much any player for a very, very long time. And and even today you have Flash, who is called God because he stopped playing to play StarCraft 2, came back, and he was instantly the best player again. This guy he has this unbeatable status, and like in StarCraft, a good winning rate was more than 50% of your games. But like Flash has win rates like 90% against Zerg, so he loses like one game out of 10. So that against players that are on his level or near his level. So you have this person or this player, and as a fan you get attached. So you keep watching. You want to know more. What is he doing? How is he doing in the game? Is he still like the best player? And who's gonna beat him? And I think that's also like makes the game attractive for fans that are invested already. But then even if for somebody that does not know about the game, or like somebody that sees one match or two and you see like this greatness, and why do people hype this guy up to be like the best? Why is he called God? And then you kind of get invested as well, right?
Yeah. Well, what you're getting at is that pros are characters. Flash is a character, Boxer is a character. Who is the really man? My StarCraft is not up to date. Like, I watched SC2 at the beginning of that game, and I never watched Brood War. But like, who is the really controversial Starcraft player.
Yeah, but you have like different
Does it
characters,
start with an I?
right?
Oh yeah, well you have tons. But the point, anyway, my point is that professional players are characters, and they're just in the same exact way that characters in lore, quote unquote, like actual game lore, are narrativized and they're put into a story and a plot, and they have their narrative, they have their development, their origin story, like a superhero, and then their struggles, and then their wins, and their eventual ascension to godlikeness. Pro players have that exact. They narrativize them in exactly the same ways, and we're attracted to that kind of story in exactly the same ways. And the same thing goes for regular sports stars, not just esports stars. I mean, if this has been going on way before esports was a thing, like look at Babe Ruth, or I don't know, any sports star, Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo, or anyone, Tom Brady. They all have their own stories, and some are villains, some are heroes, but they're all constructed in different ways. In order to excite us about them. And then, the whole game around them becomes a narrative about these characters battling each other. So, the Patriot, I'm talking about American football now, maybe that's not best, but Messi versus Ronaldo or something, where, in the beginning, Ronaldo is like the villain and Messi's like the hero, and then, things change and they become rivals, and then, things like that. There are storylines.
Yeah,
exactly.
Just like they're lores. It's its own lore.
Yeah, and I think that.
Bilal, do you have anything? Yeah.
I was gonna say, I think that kind of thing. It's interesting to see that something that exists in the real world has like turns into a story. But I think that kind of thing like happens because I mean just about everything happens based on our perspective. But like it's totally just the human perspective will see the trend and apply something to a guy and be like, wow, this guy's story is very linear, and it shows his ascension to either fame or infamy as as a professional in this kind of thing. And I think that's actually, even if you're talking about like even like League of Legends, you kind of have like you associate champions with them and with pro players, and they kind of become like these I guess characters, like you said, where they all do this sort of thing. Like Doublelift, Doublelift has his incredible like narcissism as like his character, even though you don't
hubris.
even hear him being like, you don't hear his hubris whenever he's being interviewed. Like he just talks normally.
No, he still trash talks. He's still trash.
But whenever I see, exactly. You don't even see it all the time, but everybody's like, oh, Doublelift, the guy who says everybody else is just trash.
Because that's his persona, and they have to have if you're going to be a popular player, you need a persona.
Yeah.
You need to be a character that people can understand, that people can fit into a box. It's absolutely necessary for you to be popular. And it's just part of it. That's people like characters.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm cutting you off.
No, it's fine. No, go ahead, please.
Well, what you're mentioning about champions, and this is particularly about League, and I'm sure it applies to other things.
Yep.
Like Yana, I'm sure you know if this is the case in StarCraft. I imagine it is, but because I know the thing about like Zerg rushing, but for instance in League, so pro players are characters, right? They're fit into a role. So say take Faker. Faker's an easy example. Faker's like Flash, but in League, he's God. He's won 3 world championships. He's so ridiculously good that like it's just nobody's ever come close to him. He if he ever needs to cry, he goes and cries in one of his summoner cups, and whatever. He like whatever. He's got a golden toilet, and he just doesn't care about anything. But his persona is his persona is as what was it? The unslayable, the unkillable Demon King. The immortal Demon King. He's too cool for school. He's like an anime villain. He's like that anime villain at the very end of the series who just cannot be killed. He's so overpowered that nobody can ever touch him. And so he's a character. But the champions that they associate with him in the Riot videos they're not simply champions that he plays. Champions, if you don't play League of Legends, are the characters that you play in the lore of the game. The champions that he plays, which are characters of their own, are associated with him by Riot and their videos and OGN and whoever else is constructing these sports narratives because of their the ways that they interact, or that they fit into his narrative as God, as like aloof and too cool for school and above it all, and way more smart and tactical than anyone else. So like if you look at his in his 3 world finals, in his 3 world wins, they always make these hype videos, and he's depicted as Syndra, and his skins, he has skins in the game because of course he has more skins than Yorick because he's Faker, which is ridiculous. But yeah, he's Syndra, Ryze, and Zed, like 3 coolest, most aloof, like most badass champions. Champions that are like, and if you go watch those hype videos, he's always sitting on a throne, except he's depicted as the champion, except he's got his signature glasses on, or he's eating his broccoli. So the point is that the game lore, the actual lore that Riot made up, Ryze the rogue mage, or Syndra the like godlike powerful mage, and the sports lore, right? Faker as a player, as a great player of this game, they go together. They end up creating a kind of interwoven narrative of their own. And I bet you that's true. I think that's true with Starcraft as well. I mean, I wonder if Starcraft pros who play Zerg, for instance, are depicted as more aggressive, more like reckless and all-out attack and stuff like that.
It depends on the players. I mean, in Starcraft, because you only have 3 races, so you don't have like 100 heroes to choose from, like in Dota 2 or in League of Legends. You like the players are more separated by playstyle. Of course, you have like Terran players that are more defensive. You have like creative players. You have really aggressive players, and that's like the same for all races. You have these guys that invent new strategies. So you have like the strategic genius Terran player, or like you said, you have like the cheesy Zerg player that rushes really early or that plays really aggressively, so takes a high risk. There are players like that as well. Well, like in for example fighting games, you also have like the character loyalists. You have
absolutely.
You have a bigger character pool, like most of the time not as big as League or Dota, but you have players that started playing in the 90s, like let's say Street Fighter 2. Like you had Daigo playing Ryu, and he's still playing Ryu in Street Fighter 5. And so people like associated him with, he's the Ryu player.
He is Ryu. No, he's not just the Ryu player. He is Ryu.
Yeah, exactly.
Ryu and Daigo become one character. Yeah,
exactly. And you have that thing for other players as well. Like you have people that just play really cheesy, that do actually stuff that's very risky, or you have people that most of the time you have players that define the character. So I guess it's the same like with Faker, because he's that good. He kind of defines the way how the character is played. And but what I would like to add is that the players themselves, they don't make the narrative. Like the Faker doesn't say, "Yeah, I'm that demon god guy. You cannot beat me." Maybe he does that in interviews. I don't know, but I think players are more like modest most of the time. The pro players. I mean, they need to be professional.
It depends on the player. I mean, players cultivate their personas. Think about Doublelift. Doublelift cultivated this persona. I mean, he became popular because of this persona of trash talking, and he did it because he knew he was going to get popular on it.
Yeah, but nobody.
But isn't it go on.
I was going to say, nobody. Yeah, I feel like we're like holding up, Jan. But I was just going to say, I mean, nobody like comes up on the stage and like flips keyboards and starts cussing all over the place. I mean, they all like retain a level of professionalism.
Oh, of course. But within the limits, within the parameters that are acceptable. But they create their characters, and they really do. I mean, Faker creates his character too, which is the opposite of actually how he's. Actually, it's not the opposite. It fits in with the narrative, which is that He, in every single interview, Faker's 100% humble. He never shit talks ever. He never, even when he's playing, he never uses a skin. He always uses the default skin. Basically, he's just like 100% efficiency, no shit talk, no like. Sorry, I'm swearing so much, but no. Yeah, he's not flamboyant. He's just like a machine. He's like a robot. He doesn't care. He's not in it for the hype. He's in it for the game. And that fits into this like idea of him being above it all, being like unslayable and being just perfect. And he plays on that, he hypes it up like that.
Okay, so he actively does that, but does he actually do it?
Does he actually do what?
Yeah, like hype himself up. Like you say, he's that like perfect robot-like player. Like he's a machine that just kills everyone in League of Legends.
Well, does he actually do it? Is he actually that good? I mean, yeah, but
does he say like I'm that guy, or does he like?
No, but he supports it implicitly by acting like he doesn't care about it, or acting like he just when he goes to do an interview, he just says whatever's going to make the community happy. And everybody knows it. Like when you read a Reddit thread, they're like, "Oh yeah, but Faker he never means what he says in interviews, so don't listen to it." Like he always says that, "Oh, this person's probably better than me on this champion," and then he goes in the next game and he absolutely trashes them. Like he just like 20-0. They're just like, "What the hell?" Yeah. Faker just destroyed me after he did an interview and said I was better than him. So he has this like professional aura that's so ultra professional that everybody knows it's not true. And he maintains it in order, and it totally hypes up his character, because to everybody else, his character is the guy who will like talk, professionally to your face, because he's such a robot that he'll go into game and destroy you.
Okay. So what I actually wanted to get at is that, don't you think like players start playing their character like well, not like the in-game character, but their personalities they kind of represent, because of how the community sees them? Like
oh yeah, definitely.
If a game is popular, then of course you have forums or news websites that follow the scene. So isn't it like nicknames are given by the community? Like I doubt Flash called himself God.
No.
So I think like an important role is the community behind the game, like the players that or the fans that just follow and kind of write news, do fan videos like highlight videos, etc. And through that, players actually get famous, I think.
Of course, yeah. And the characters get created based on, I mean, I don't think it's only the community. I think some players go in with the mindset that I'm going to be this kind of guy in the scene. I'm going to be the trash talker, or I'm going to be the humble one, or I'm going to be, I'm going to be the silly one who never cares about games and trolls, whatever. They might go into that scene like that, but their creation of their public persona is heavily influenced. I mean, maybe mostly influenced by the community and how they construct it as well.
And I was gonna say, I actually, unless somebody has like something more to say about that, then I was just gonna say, actually I wanted to invite a sort of question about how much do we actually think this topic matters in the success of an esport. Take a kind of business standpoint on it almost, or marketing, and like how much do you think, like, say let's put in a hypothetical, like if an esport company has an esport, and then they don't engage in this community at all, and they kind of let other companies run the tournaments, and the players, all the pros are kind of fending for themselves, they're not getting paid by the company, and they're
the game developer. company,
yeah,
right?
the game developer, and their personas are kind of like developed only by a community, and they're not really followed. They don't have anything like Riot's like Legends Rising, no coverage from the game developer. Like how much do you think that would affect the player base and like monthly active users? Would it tank the number of players, or would it not matter that much?
Smash Bros. I mean, look at Melee.
Explain.
I mean, Melee is that game, and it's one of the most successful. I
Really?
mean, it's not Riot levels, but Nintendo has not even patched the game. I don't know. When did the game come out? Like 2000? They haven't patched it.
It's on GameCube,
totally unbalanced.
Right?
Yeah, it's on GameCube. They still play it on GameCube or Wii. But
yeah,
it's totally unbalanced. I mean, it's so unbalanced, it's hilarious. Like, Fox is the best character, and the whole joke is that in 20XX, every single pro player is going to play Fox because he's objectively the best character, and they're going to be so perfect at him that every single game is going to play out exactly the same way. And yet, all the pro players have had their stories cultivated and their personas, and the esport has been cultivated as a narrative by the community alone, without anything from Nintendo and by third-party companies. So it's totally possible without developer help. But there needs to be a community there. Yeah, there needs to be some money in the scene.
Yeah, but think sorry, I was just gonna ask, like, if Nintendo were to interfere with that, like, do you think that do you think it would increase a lot, or would it just seem boring? Because from two standpoints. One, from if they just started doing it now because they're like, oh, we have a pro scene, let's capitalize on it. In my opinion, that would seem kind of impersonal.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Sorry. Like, pro players actually asked Nintendo to support the scene with money, and Nintendo said, no, we want to keep you playing the game like it's played right now, and like, they accept the scene the way it is. And I think it was Reggie, the president of Nintendo America, that something like that. So they won't get involved with the melee scene. And for me, it makes sense that Nintendo keeps out of melee, because they have nothing to gain from it. They don't sell GameCubes anymore. They don't sell the game anymore. There's no virtual console release, anything like that. To promote the product, so they actually get something back from it. It would just be throwing money at people, and I mean, as a company, you are losing money with that.
You might be. I mean, well, I don't know Nintendo's marketing. I mean, it's great marketing for Nintendo, period. So, not sure if that's... Yeah, so I mean, they might make money off it just because they'd be selling different consoles.
But they would have to release or re-release Melee on
I mean they could sell just Switches and sell Zelda Breath of the Wild by advertising on Melee streams if they supported the scene.
Oh yeah, it's like
they could do it. They could use. I mean, Riot. Look at Riot. Riot uses the LCS as just a marketing tool. Their game is free. They don't sell any. I mean, what it sells is secondary items, which are microtransaction skins, right? But they're things that you don't have to buy to play the game. So in the same way, Nintendo could make money by just using Melee. I'm not saying Nintendo should.
Yeah.
And although it'd probably be better for the scene if Nintendo got involved and injected it with a ton of money, of course it would be. It would just make it all easier for them. Even it's already a huge scene. It would probably grow to like one of the biggest if Nintendo came in. But Nintendo might make money off it, like Riot makes money, and they don't sell a product necessarily.
But the product is related to the game. In this case, I think that you would, of course, you could promote other games, but like, fighting game players might only be, or Smash players might only be interested in Smash. Right. Or maybe they are already fans of Nintendo, so then you don't have to sell like the new Zelda game to them.
Yeah,
Well, Nintendo probably definitely knows their own marketing better than I know their marketing.
Yeah.
I mean, but so I don't question their decision. But I can see a world. There definitely exists a world where Nintendo comes in, puts a ton of money into the Melee scene, re-releases Melee, just Melee, because everybody loves Melee, with like enhanced graphics but exactly the same mechanics just on their on the Switch or something, remastered, and makes a ton of money off of it. I mean, they could do that. I have no doubt in my mind that they could do that.
Yeah. Can I just give my opinion on the question?
Please.
So, I think because like Smash Brothers Melee and Starcraft, they started back when there was no esport pretty much, or esport was very small. Like maybe you had some Quake championships or Starcraft championships where you could win some money, not like millions you can win today. And I think as a developer, the first the community story is not that important at first. I mean, people listening to our podcast probably are not working at Blizzard or some super huge
we hope
game dev company that has like the this credibility to release really good games. So the first or the most important thing first is to actually develop a game that's good quality-wise, so people actually play the game. I mean, you can throw money at people. As soon as you stop doing that, they will quit.
Yeah.
So I think that the most important thing in the starting phase when you release the game, have the game be a good game, have it be playable, like have it be fun so people stick around.
Yeah.
And then after you have a community and you see, okay, we have some tournaments running, like maybe you have like weekly tournaments with 30 people joining, then you can say, okay, so people are actually interested in playing this game competitively. So maybe let's support it, or let's see if there are some community websites. You could do like developer interviews and stuff like that, so to kind of get in touch with the community. So from that point on, I think community story building is important. Like after release, it's important that at some point in time there is community story building involved. Not necessarily as a developer, like you cannot force people to write news or be interested in the game. So just as a developer, you also have to let people kind of be. You could throw around lawsuits like, don't play our game in tournaments, don't show it on stream and stuff, because it's your intellectual property. But if you do that, your most motivated fans are gonna stop supporting you, I think.
Yeah. I think so as well. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's more. Yeah, I guess it's more of like. I mean, would you guys think? It's more of a question of how effective that marketing tool is, because I think obviously it's always a case-to-case basis. But like imagine if League didn't have their LCS at all. Like, I mean, how would their player base tank?
Hugely.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, that's
like the most genius marketing ever in gaming.
Yeah,
it's incredible. Yeah.
And then, but just like Jan was saying, it's kind of difficult to engage in it at the beginning. And what I think what I would use as a strategy there is when you don't have a pro scene, like in an esport that you're trying to make, or whatnot. I think what's most important is to have a Twitch integration. Similar to Planetary Annihilation, the RTS is an example where they had this. I mean, their UI menu was awful, slow, and horrible. But the importance was the layout was working, and they had Twitch. As soon as you opened it, Twitch was sitting on the right there, showing you the most popular streams. And I remember actually Pisidian was like the biggest streamer. He was like one of the best like Twitch players that was like popping up there. And so I watched him a lot, and I joined a couple of his games actually.
I was in there. Yeah.
Yeah. Simply, I remember that. Yeah, simply because
we got
like
smashed.
Yeah, yeah, he was
so
really
badly.
Good. But yeah, simply just because Twitch was on the side, and that just got that like watching how good somebody else is inspiring, and it makes you want to play the game more. Especially if there's like a ladder in the game where you can progress and show people, yeah, I progressed this much on the ladder and I got to this rank. Just simply, I mean, like if you don't have a pro scene, and I think the simplest way to grow the community around that kind of competitive thought process is to have some sort of Twitch integration sitting there. Simply for that streaming.
I think this kind of thing extends outside of esports and pro scenes too. I mean, communities, we're talking about communities generally. And I mean, I hesitate to call Planetary Annihilation esports anyway, because it was really never played professionally. I guess maybe that will ruffle some feathers. It's a professional. What the point is that it was a multiplayer game and a competitive game.
It was certainly played competitively.
It was played competitively, and it was meant to be played competitively. But Twitch integration and community building in that way extends beyond competitive games. Like the most pressing example for me is RuneScape, which I think is hilarious. But they have Twitch integration in RuneScape. When you log into RuneScape, there's a little Twitch tab, and you can stream right from your RuneScape client. And I mean, I don't know if this is true or not, but it seems to me, having played RuneScape since 2002, like a really long time. Pretty much the whole length of the game, that the resurgence, apart from being, the product of good design decisions in the like wake of awful design decisions like EOC and the removal of the wilderness and things, recently there have been more good design decisions. The real resurgence in popularity of RuneScape has been because of Twitch. Suddenly we have all these and kind of esports-esque content. Like, I don't know if you guys know RuneScape at all, but there's a mode called Dead Man mode, where when you're in that mode, as opposed to everyday life on RuneScape, you can kill anyone in the world, and you can fight anyone, and so everyone can fight everyone, and if you die, you're basically out of the game because you don't just lose your items, you lose your stats too. And they do tournaments so that it only lasts 10 days, and there's 5 times XP rates, so it's kind of an MMO and kind of not. It like kind of toes the line, and when they do that kind of thing, everyone streams it, and the Twitch integration helps hugely, because everybody's watching and everybody's like wants to go make an account and play Dead Man mode.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. Communities operate a little bit differently in MMOs than they do in competitive games, obviously.
Yeah.
And because MMOs are, they are communities. Like, I remember when I was playing RuneScape in like the early 2000s as a kid, I didn't really play RuneScape. It was basically a glorified instant messenger.
Chat box, yeah.
It was a glorified chat box, and it was much more fun than a chat box because you could be in the world with somebody. Like, you could have a character and stand next to them talking, as opposed to having AIM open and, chatting with them through that, right? And you could meet people from around the world, and you could have a clan, and you could kind of do things together. But, most of the time I just stood in the bank and chatted to my friends who I didn't know, but I, met them on RuneScape. So MMOs, which are entirely based on community, have the kind of, I think, had a resurgence with Twitch and with like these new methods of community building.
Yeah.
So we kind of got to our last point of our podcast today, like how you implement the story, like the community story or in-game story in your game, and how you take advantage of it. You already talked about Twitch implementation and in games to make people more involved in the community or in the game. like you see good players playing, or maybe like the interaction with other players. Do you have any other ideas how one can take advantage of like in-game story or community story to make your game more attractive or keep people playing?
Mm-hmm.
At this point, I wouldn't say. I mean, I would say definitely Twitch, allowing people to talk to you like as you're making it. I mean, that kind of stuff.
I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, I just I have to formulate my thoughts. I was thinking about ESO actually. Actually, I was thinking I'm still on this topic of MMOs, but I'm also thinking that one of the main draws for me in a game, even if it's an MMO, even if it's like RuneScape where it's chill. Basically, you can just RuneScape's kind of like a loading bar for me. I can just sit there AFK, and my XP's going up, so I'm happy.
Yeah.
It's like a loading bar. It's literally a loading bar that lasts for hours and hours and hours. And I get dopamine releases every time that loading bar goes up. So it makes me happy, and you want to keep playing it.
Progression.
And yet there's still an element. The reason that loading bar is fun is because there's an element of competitiveness in it. Like I wouldn't care about that loading bar if I couldn't show it off to my friends, right? That's what I care about, and being able to slay higher monsters and go in game with Sam and TK, two of our friends, and be able to smash them because I'm way higher level than them and I've been able to play for so much longer. So there's these two elements. There's an element of progression, which is of course integral to like all game design, even like very basic abstract games like Flower. And there's an element of competition, and like games that do that perfectly. I think ESO is actually a game that does that really well. Having this faction system, which immediately, so you have the progression element, which is just standard MMO stuff, but then you have this faction system, which, even in just the character creation screen, you already have the knowledge and kind of the sense that you're competing against someone because you've chosen a faction, and there are tons every other player out there, 2/3 of the player base is competing against you, right? If you choose the Dominion, then you're competing against the other two, and so on and so forth. And that ends up creating communities because you get people competing against each other, even if you're just playing an MMO where it's kind of a loading bar.
Yeah, and I think so if we want to say like as advice to anybody who would be making,
since we're such sage wise
I think
developers,
I think that if you want like that sort of thing, like with marketing from a community standpoint, not just an esport or anything like that, I think that the biggest thing is that like a lot of people will forget, like how do I make, even in business, how do I make my business successful? I don't understand. And it's kind of just learning to listen to and like being aware of what's going on in the community. Like, even if your community is this one guy you met on the internet who's like asking you about how the development of your game is going, you need to engage. Like, you need to be humble enough to engage in a conversation one-on-one with this guy, and be like, I'm planning on implementing this next, and all that, and like you need to be investigative of like how, like what's going on in your community, I think. And yeah, so I mean, if we want to move on, I guess, to how like, I guess how esports are implementing story and lore and all that sort of stuff to get that effect. I think it's a good exercise to like even hop into a game and just play and see what are they doing, and that's why I kind of want to talk about now. Like how are popular games implementing story and lore to get an effect of like mainly like how they get the effect of players being interested in the game, not just from the gameplay being fun, but the characters being interesting. And even if they're just like simple characters, like how do successful esports implement that? And actually I want to start with asking Michael, what do you think, like what are the examples, like what about League of Legends really I guess, shows that aspect of characters and what makes it interesting for a certain person to be attached to a character. Like what are they doing in general?
Yeah, I mean, League is actually, for as much as I talk about Faker being defined by his champion pool and depicted as Ryze and Syndra and Ari and Zed, these League is kind of sparse on the game lore to community lore connection. I mean, they really stress spectacle game mechanics and pro narratives above and beyond their own game lore. I mean, there's so many. If you go to the League of Legends Reddit or subreddit, the meme is that, for instance, Urgot, who's a champion, has his entire lore was that he has a dark secret past, or that they're just like, sometimes they just totally disregard the lore and they've retconned it and reworked it, multiple times now, and it's totally ridiculous, and yet the game is still really popular because what's really important is that they have that pro narrative, that they have the narratives that are important are the ones that are built in the pro scene or in the community. And so when you get it, I mean, when I got into League, it wasn't because of the lore. It was because I watched TSM players streaming on Twitch being really good at the game. And it's because they were interacting with their teammates. It was like a team sport. I mean, I cared about as much about the champions as I probably cared more about the champions than many people, just because I'm really, I care about the aesthetics of the game, and I play champions just based on how cool they look. And I think that's not generally the case. You play a champion because, right? Yeah. So I play. When I got into League, I bought Xerath because I thought he looked cool as shit.
Yeah.
He's got lightning. He's got he shoots it. He's a mage. He's like the most powerful mage. He can shoot from super far range. I don't know. I really liked him.
Yeah.
And but the reason I got into the game originally was not because it had cool characters. It was because I saw the odd one streaming on Twitch and being, funny and beating people up. I think if you want to find I want to go back to ESO, honestly. If you want to find a really good example of a game, and I mean, that game gets a lot of flack, and it's not like ultra popular, but that game, or World of Warcraft, that has a competitive scene. Arenas and such, and the World of Warcraft World Championships and all this stuff. That's a game that is, where the game lore is integral to its existence.
Yeah.
You could not have World of Warcraft or ESO, really any MMO, without game lore. They are game lore.
Yeah, that's true.
They're like game lore. Yeah, they're that's what you're playing out a fantasy, a role playing game. And yet they still incorporate elements of community lore and competition and stuff, and those things are kind of intricately intertwined in those games to a degree that they're not in League of Legends or maybe even Starcraft. I'm not really sure about that.
Yeah, actually, speaking of Starcraft, Jan, do you want to share? I mean, how does what are the most interesting things that like Starcraft Brood War is doing? To implement story and lore and supplement, I guess, the esport part of that, based on factions and characters and all that. Like,
people still play Brood War? I guess they do still play Brood War. Brood War's probably bigger than SC2.
It's coming back right now in
Korea.
Yeah. It's probably gonna be more popular than StarCraft 2.
Probably
soon, or maybe it's already, because all the really good players are already back in Brood War. But to get back to the question, the networks that broadcasted the tournaments in the past, like OnGameNet and NBC Game, they used the lore of the game to define the races. So the proud Protoss players and the Swarm Zerg players and stuff like that. So they kind of took the in-game lore and also put it on the players and which race they use.
Yeah.
So they kind of used the in-game lore to also define the community lore or story, and I think they also invented a lot of characters for the players, like God, Flash, and or the. I mean, they made Slayer's boxer that popular. He was the best player at that time, but because he was that charismatic player, I think StarCraft Brood War actually took off. So of course they took that player, and they knew, okay, he's the charismatic player and he's the best. So we need to sell that, guys, to make the game popular and to increase our ratings. And that's why fans actually went to tournaments. I think at one point you had, I think it was 2004, where you had a tournament near the beach with 100,000 spectators.
Wow.
So, like, you have that picture of a stadium and like outside stadium, and you saw the rows, and there were even more rows outside the gates. So there were a lot of people actually watching, and I think one of the reasons is that the game networks did such a good job to actually market the game. Like it's when you have like Terran versus Zerg, Terran versus Protoss, you have these battles in the story as well. So it's also kind of playing out the story. I mean, StarCraft is about fighting for survival story-wise, and of course you have like character relationships. Like they become friends and they become enemies and stuff like that. So they kind of took that as well, and so they implemented that in how the matchups play out. And
I mean, look at like I think World of Warcraft is a good example of this too. Actually, MMOs generally, because what they do is they lock you into from character creation, they lock you into a particular faction. Like in StarCraft, any pro could, even though this isn't the case, and you're totally right about them constructing their personas around the game lore, a pro can change from and they could play one game as Protoss and they could play the next game as Zerg if they wanted to.
Yeah,
I think
they typically do.
It'd be pretty hard. But they could technically do it. Whereas you play World of Warcraft you have to put in 500 hours to level up a horde character to level 90 or whatever the max level is, and you have to or alliance, you have to put in that many hours. So you literally cannot change. I mean, you can, and people do, but there's an inhibition to changing, right? Like you're locking yourselves into a particular lore-based community.
I mean, it's not too different though. With League of Legends, obviously you have the choice. I mean, you can you need to have a champion pool, but in something like StarCraft, I mean, you don't see you'll only know what the other person is playing once you know who your competitor is, and by that time, I mean, you already know. Like, you typically already you're not going to counterpick somebody's, Protoss with your Zerg. Like, you don't get to choose to counterpick.
No. StarCraft is much more locked in than League is.
No, but I'm saying it's not too different from World of Warcraft because, I mean, because pros, like, while obviously there's no level, I mean, the level system is not like something that locks you in StarCraft. It's just, basic ranking. But but that's completely irrelevant. I mean, because pros will typically like stick their character, kind of like we said, they'll stick to a champion pool in like League.
But I think, sorry, just one comment. I think for StarCraft, the thing is that the game is pretty balanced. So you want to play the race you're best at.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you want to play the game, the race you have the most routine with. While in League of Legends or Dota, you have good and bad matchups, or in fighting games as well. So if you keep playing one hero only or one character only, then you're gonna lose because the other team knows, you only play that hero, so we just counter it with that hero, which is, let's say, wins 90% of the games against that hero.
Yeah, like you can't ban somebody.
Reckless losing at Rift Rivals with Kennen.
Let's not go too far into these points. I think we wanted to talk about how you can use this stuff for an esport, how to make it popular. So let's get back to that point, or how you can capitalize on this. And I think like we talked about popular players, but as a developer you could organize rival matches. Like you take you have to always have rivalries, right? You have the best player and the second best player, or maybe you have people that just don't like each other, so you can
grudge matches, baby.
You can take those to hype it up, and you just take the players for this marketing thing. Like have the best players show how the game is actually played at that point in time, or then you could kind of analyze the matches so people actually learn what the players were thinking to also promote the game. So I think this player perspective, it's not just about like you have players just kind of playing the game and sticking to one race, but you can also use it to your advantage as a developer to also get input into the game, what stuff should be changed, what's imbalanced, so you can make it a better game.
Yeah, absolutely.
And of course you can also, like in Dota 2, we are talking about big esport games, and so until you get to that point, you cannot sell skins or like commentators if nobody's playing the game. So of course you may need to make use of what you have as a small dev, but I think you can kind of make the increase the replay value by adding just small content things like skins, or maybe voices, or maybe a new unit for a foreign strategy game, or maybe you add a new race or some new lore. Like I think in Dota 2, with all these mystic skins made by Valve, they also include like comics or lore behind like the items. Exactly. So even if there's something small like that, as a dev, you should maybe think, why would that character maybe wear that armor, or use that weapon, or why, like for example in Starcraft, you play Terran, and then you get a unit that kind of fits Zerg, that it doesn't really match with the race, right? So you need to pay attention to what you're actually implementing for which race, so you keep kind of consistent with the lore of the game.
For sure. Like you wouldn't want to reskin a Hydralisk with an assault rifle.
Well, of course, but of course you can have a Maokai skin that's what is it? Kitty Cat Maokai or whatever. I don't actually know. Meowkai. Yeah. I mean, and it depends on the particular developer and the particular community. I mean, sometimes meme skins are just a thing. Yeah. And then some games lore is more integral to the game's production, or it's more like necessary to keep the lore intact than in others. Like I'd say in League, for instance, the lore is very much, it's put to the wayside, or even not put to the wayside, but used in a much more ironic way than, say, in StarCraft it is. Like when they have done in the past, so in League, like you were saying, Jan, you cannot, or in Dota, I think Dota takes its lore more seriously than League.
Yeah, that's true.
But, in League, you can't be a pro player and just stick to one champion. You can have a pocket pick, and they promote you for having a pocket pick because they want to associate. In fact, they create a whole series called Pocket Picks, where the player, they interview the player and they talk about why they kept picking this champion even though this champion went out of the meta, and that's my champion, and then they become associated with the champion, just like we were talking about with Faker earlier. But beyond that, which is a pretty limited, association of player and character, you can't have just one character, a 1-to-1 ratio player to character. So they can't have this kind of lore-based combat. There is no lore-based combat, right? You can have like a Noxus champion and a Demacian champion playing together, and that's often happening. And you're never going to have a situation where, like Starcraft, where you literally have Protoss versus Zerg, right? Where there's a real kind of lore-based scenario that's going on in the background of the competition. Yeah. So instead, a company like Riot, or Nintendo, Super Smash Bros. Is the same way. It's just this mishmash of Nintendo characters that all have their own lores but are totally mixed up, and who cares who plays what, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But in both those games they host tournaments that are based on lore. So like they have the Demacia. Well, they had the Demacia versus Noxus Cup, and even in China there's the Demacia Cup, which isn't exactly based on lore, but they often have show matches surrounding it which are based on lore. So they make the casters play, or they make certain pros play only Demacian champions and others play Ionian champions or whatever, something like this. And then they see who wins, like, oh, Ionia won this battle, even though who the hell cares in League whether Ionia wins or Noxus wins.
Yeah,
they still play on it.
Yeah, point being that it's like basically just depends on which game it is, whether the skins or items can be ironic.
Right.
Anyway, so
yeah, and the other point being that even if the lore is really shallow and not taken seriously and is often ironic, it still can be deployed as an organizing strategy or a market. It can be a point of interest.
Exactly.
Like you can have a Demacia versus Noxus tournament, and it's fun to watch, even if the lore is totally ironic and silly.
Yeah.
It just keeps the players interested, right? Or
yeah,
like you just add new stuff, and like we said, it needs to fit in like the lore. If you have that faction, the character needs to fit that faction actually.
Yeah.
All right, then shall we wrap it up for today?
All right.
Yeah, it's been a long one.
Yeah.
Has it? How long have we been going?
1 hour 22 minutes.
That's because I talk too much. I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah, no problem. Guest podcast guests will be banned next week. With a shorter one.
There's a cooldown timer on us podcast guests. We got like a 5-day cooldown.
All right, so we talked about in-game story, how important it is for the game. We kind of said, okay, you have games that have a deeper story that kind of build on the story to keep players interested, and then we talked about games that don't have a story at all or not very much story, but we kind of agreed that some kind of story building needs to be involved to keep the player playing, else the game is kind of boring. And you don't keep people attached to the game, especially for esport games as well. Then we talked about community story, how players kind of define characters or races they use, and how it influences the fans or people just maybe looking on Twitch, and how they get interested by watching players, like their development and their strategies, or why they are the best players, like the background of these star players, let's say. And we also talked how that actually gets created from a community perspective. You have people writing news, you have people actually kind of defining a player like the character that he or she wants to be, or maybe is seen as like, for example, some mechanical player looking like being like a robot, for example, or somebody that is unbeatable being called God, and on. And then in the end, we talked about how both of these actually affects like the popularity of the game, or how you can use it to your advantage. So we talked about like Twitch implementation to kind of take the community aspect and make it easy for people to get involved and kind of meet the community. Then we talked about how you can implement small additional content to keep people interested in the game and expand the story or the game lore, give people more content to explore. And so there, we talked about different stuff you can add, what you need to pay attention to. For example, not making like adding a character that does not fit the game world or that faction. And so there are also things one needs to consider as a developer before actually implementing some form of content into the game. And so that's our content summary for this week. Do you guys have any final comments you would like to say to our listeners?
Thanks for having me. It was a lit time.
Nothing on me.
All right. Well, I'm going out with that amazing comment. So
okay.
Hopefully you'll have me back soon and for more lit times.
Yeah, hopefully. If we have any topics that we might be able to use you,
we'll use me like a tool.
Yeah. So it was. Thanks for your inputs, Mike. Was
no
interesting,
problem.
Especially because I'm not that experienced in League of Legends, so it's also interesting to hear from that perspective how Riot actually uses it. I mean, probably some listeners that want to go into this multiplayer direction also find it interesting how they actually use everything like players and story to make the game that popular. And then let's not keep our listeners listen to us for another hour and 25 minutes or so.
Yeah.
And thank you for listening. And I hope you will listen to our podcast next week.
Yeah, and make sure to leave a comment if you're what's it called? If you agree or disagree with anything, or if you completely thought it made no sense.
I really want my hate mail, so please send it to me as quickly as possible.
Yeah, anyway, leave a comment and we'll try to get to it. So yeah, we'll see you next time.
Okay, see you next time, guys. Bye.
Peace.